Charlie Sheen's bomb tossing since the suspension of production of 2.5 Men last Thursday has gone largely unanswered by his targets at Warner Brothers Television Studio.
Okay, your passion is coming off as erratic.
Right. Well, you borrow my brain for 5 seconds and just be like, dude, can't handle it. Unplug this bastard. Yeah, because it fires in a way that is, I don't know, maybe not from this particular terrestrial realm.
That's when Sheen went on a rampage on the radio.
You sound like Thomas Jefferson.
Well, I'm not Thomas Jefferson. He was a. No, but I dare anyone to debate me on things. Debate me on AA right now. I have a disease, and I cured it with my brain, with my mind. I'm cured. I'm done.
But it soon turned to hatred aimed directly at the show's co-creator, Chuck Lorre.
That it's nothing this side of deplorable that a certain Chaim Levine, yeah, that's Chuck's real name, mistook this rock star for his own selfish exit strategy, bro. Last I checked, Chaim, I've spent, I think, close to the last decade, I don't know, effortlessly and magically converting your tin cans into pure gold. Well, you've been warned, dude. Bring it.
The year is 2011. Charlie Sheen sits across from a television reporter, eyes blazing, voice defiant. He speaks in sound bites that would soon become memes. Tiger blood. Adonis DNA. Winning. His words spill out like gasoline on fire. Chaotic, unstoppable, mesmerizing. This is the image the world remembers. Hollywood's highest-paid television actor unraveling on live TV, a man once at the top of the industry, now reduced to a spectacle of excess and delusion. But this moment, shocking as it was only the climax of a story that had been building for decades. Because before Charlie Sheen became a punchline, he was a prodigy. Before he became the poster child of self-destruction, he was the son of Hollywood royalty, the star of iconic films, and the face of a sitcom that drew millions of viewers every week. He wasn't supposed to fall. He wasn't supposed to burn. And yet, under the weight of addiction, fame, and an insatiable hunger for more, he did. This is the story of Charlie Sheen. From the golden boy of Hollywood to a man consumed by scandal, addiction, and tragedy. A story of talent wasted, fame distorted, and a spotlight that exposed everything he tried to hide. Charlie Sheen entered the world on September 3, 1965, in New York City as Carlos Erwin Estevez, the youngest child of Martin and Janet Sheen. From the beginning, he was destined to live in the orbit of Hollywood. His father, Martin Sheen, was a respected actor whose breakthrough in Apocalypse now made him both a critical darling and a man forever tied to the chaos of show business. For young Charlie, this meant growing up surrounded by both the glamour and the volatility of an industry that could elevate and destroy without warning. The Sheen household was unusual by suburban standards. Martin Sheen's career meant constant moves, changing sets of friends, and exposure to a lifestyle that was anything but ordinary. Charlie's siblings, Emilio, Ramon, and Renee, all found their way into acting. In fact, his older brother Emilio chose to keep the family's real surname, Estevez, while Charlie, following his father's path, adopted the Sheen name as his own stage identity. From the outside, it looked like a family destined for Hollywood royalty. But Charlie wasn't just Martin Sheen's son. He was magnetic in his own right. Teachers and classmates remember a boy who was charming, restless, and endlessly mischievous. He excelled in sports, particularly baseball, and for a time dreamed of going pro. His natural athleticism earned him a reputation as one of the most promising players in his high school, and scouts even expressed interest. But Charlie struggled academically, often distracted, rebellious, and far more drawn to thrills than textbooks. His poor grades eventually closed the door on a serious baseball career. When the diamond slipped away, the camera became his new field. Alongside childhood friends Rob Lowe and Sean Penn, Charlie began experimenting with his father's home video camera. They would write short scripts, film scenes, and act out exaggerated characters. It was in hindsight a training ground, one that revealed Charlie's innate gift for performance. He had timing, presence, and that ineffable screen magnetism. Even among other talented kids, Charlie stood out. Hollywood soon came calling. His first significant film role arrived in 1984 with a small part in Red Dawn, playing one of a group of American teenagers fighting Soviet invaders. At just 19, he was already rubbing shoulders with the Brat Pack, a new generation of rising stars. But it was 1986 that truly changed everything. Oliver Stone cast him as Chris Taylor, the young soldier at the center of Platoon, a harrowing Vietnam War drama that would go on to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards. Charlie's performance was subtle yet powerful. He was the audience's entry point into the nightmare of war, a boy forced into manhood through violence and trauma. The role elevated him from promising young actor to Hollywood's next big name. That same year, he had a brief but unforgettable appearance in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, playing a disheveled delinquent who shares a scene with Jennifer Grey. With only a few lines, he stole the moment, cementing himself as a new kind of screen presence, dangerous, unpredictable, unforgettable. In 1987, Sheen took on Wall Street, again with Oliver Stone, this time as Bud Fox, the ambitious young broker seduced by Gordon Gekko's mantra of greed. The role spoke to an entire generation caught between ambition and morality. By the end of the decade, Charlie Sheen was no longer just Martin Sheen's son. He was Charlie Sheen, a name that carried weight, box office pull, and the promise of a long, brilliant career. But beneath the surface, the seeds of his eventual downfall were already being planted. Charlie was living fast, even then. His taste for late nights, his attraction to risk, and his growing experimentation with drugs and women were whispered about in Hollywood circles. To many, it was just the behavior of a young star enjoying his success. To others, it was a warning. Charlie Sheen had stepped into the spotlight with immense promise. But even in his earliest days, the tension between his talent and his impulses was clear. It was only a matter of time before those impulses would start to overshadow the brilliance. For nearly 3 decades, Charlie Sheen had lived in a paradox, both Hollywood's golden boy and its most notorious rebel. But by the late 2000s, the contradictions that made him fascinating began to turn against him. The cracks in the image, once dismissed as part of the Charlie Sheen legend, were now impossible to ignore. Even before his television reign, the warning signs were there. In 1990, his name surfaced in the infamous Heidi Fleisch scandal, linking him to Hollywood's high-priced call-girl network. In 1998, he nearly died of a cocaine overdose, an incident that should have been a wake-up call. Instead, it was folded into his mythology, the bad boy who could cheat death, the wild thing who lived up to his nickname off-screen. When 2.5 Men launched in 2003, the world assumed Sheen had matured. The sitcom seemed like the perfect comeback, a steady paycheck, and a role that rewarded his charisma while papering over his volatility. But behind the scenes, the same destructive appetites continued. Co-stars whispered about his mood swings, crew members noticed his tardiness, and production schedules bent around his erratic behavior. The cracks widened in 2009. That year, Sheen was arrested on domestic violence charges after a violent altercation with his then-wife, Brooke Mueller. Though he pleaded guilty to a lesser charge and entered rehab, the headlines told a different story. Hollywood's highest-paid actor was spiraling. The incident stained his reputation, and while CBS kept the show alive, industry insiders were already asking how long they could protect him. By 2010, the situation grew more volatile. Sheen trashed hotel rooms during drug-fueled binges. He entered and exited rehab multiple times. Tabloids ran near-daily updates of his latest exploits, escorts, all-night parties, public meltdowns. For most actors, any one of these scandals would have spelled the end of their career. But Sheen seemed to thrive on the chaos. Ratings for 2.5 Men held steady, and fans couldn't look away. That paradox of destruction feeding popularity was the very heart of Sheen's unraveling. He began to believe he was invincible, that no matter how reckless his behavior, the public and the industry would always forgive him. But behind the scenes, executives were running out of patience. Insurance companies raised alarms about the cost of keeping him on set. Writers worried whether he would even show up to film. The cracks were visible to everyone, the public who laughed at the headlines, the network scrambling to contain the fallout, and the man himself, convinced that chaos was proof of his power. Charlie Sheen was no longer just playing Charlie Harper on television. He was living the role in real time. And the lines between character and actor were beginning to blur so completely that both were about to collapse. By 2011, the cracks that had long been spreading through Charlie Sheen's life finally gave way, shattering his career and turning him into a spectacle the world couldn't look away from. It wasn't a quiet decline, it was a public implosion, played out across headlines, talk shows, and viral clips that transformed a respected actor into the face of Hollywood self-destruction. It began with the mounting tension on 2.5 Men. For years, Sheen's personal chaos had been tolerated because the ratings were too high, the profits too immense. But by early 2011, even CBS and Warner Brothers had reached a breaking point. Sheen's absences from set disrupted filming. His drug binges made headlines before scripts were finished. And then came his verbal assault on Chuck Lorre, the show's creator. In interviews, Sheen hurled insults at the man who had given him his most successful role. It was an extraordinary act of self-sabotage, biting the very hand that had built his fortune. The network acted swiftly. In March 2011, Charlie Sheen was fired from 2.5 Men, losing a contract worth tens of millions. Overnight, he went from the highest-paid actor in television to an unemployed cautionary tale. But Sheen didn't retreat. Instead, he detonated. In the weeks that followed, he became a one-man media hurricane. He appeared on every talk show that would have him, delivering bizarre, manic interviews that ricocheted across the internet. He coined phrases that would become memes overnight: tiger blood, Adonis DNA, winning. He spoke of himself as a warlock with fire-breathing fists. To his fans, it was equal parts comedy and tragedy. To his critics, it was evidence of a man spiraling out of control. Social media, still in its cultural adolescence, turned Sheen into one of the first viral celebrities of the digital era. His Twitter account broke records, amassing 1 million followers in just over a day. His rants were remixed into songs, GIFs, and parodies. For a brief moment, winning became a cultural catchphrase, a shorthand for reckless defiance. But beneath the humor, the reality was grim. This was a man unraveling before millions, and the world was laughing at his collapse. Desperate to capitalize on the frenzy, Sheen launched a nationwide tour. My violent torpedo of truth/defeat is not an option. The title alone reflected his delusion of grandeur. Fans expected outrageous comedy, the same wild energy from his interviews. Instead, they got incoherence, rambling monologues, half-baked jokes. Audiences booed. Shows ended early. What was meant to be a triumphant reinvention became a parade of humiliation, proving that the line between fame and farce had finally disappeared. Behind the spectacle, his personal life disintegrated further. Custody battles over his children played out in courtrooms and tabloids. Stories of drug binges with adult film stars dominated headlines. Financial troubles mounted as lawsuits piled up. And through it all, Charlie seemed detached, convinced he was still winning, while the world saw nothing but loss. This was the downfall, not a single event, but a relentless cascade. The firing, the interviews, the memes, the failed tour. Each moment chipped away at what little credibility he still held, until Charlie Sheen was no longer seen as an actor, but as a walking scandal. The man who had once commanded millions per episode was now a punchline. His image, carefully built over decades of film and television, lay in ruins. And yet the cameras kept rolling because Hollywood and the public had decided. Charlie Sheen's destruction wasn't a tragedy, it was entertainment. If 2011 marked the implosion of Charlie Sheen's career, then 2015 brought the revelation that finally stripped away the last fragments of his myth of invincibility. On November 17th, Sheen sat across from Today show host Matt Lauer, his face visibly heavier, his voice trembling as he confessed a secret he had carried for years. He was HIV positive. The announcement stunned the world. For 4 years, rumors had swirled about his health, rumors fueled by his erratic behavior, his sudden disappearances, his increasingly gaunt appearances. But few expected the truth. At the very height of his public meltdown in 2011, while proclaiming he was winning and filled with tiger blood, Charlie Sheen had been privately grappling with a diagnosis that would forever change his life. The fallout was immediate and merciless. Tabloids pounced on the story, digging into his private life with a new ferocity. Lawsuits flooded in from former partners who accused him of concealing his condition. Headlines branded him reckless, dangerous, even criminal. The same media that had once turned his downfall into comedy now painted him as a public health threat. For Sheen, the announcement was more than public humiliation. It was a breaking point. His carefully cultivated persona of indestructibility, the man who survived overdoses, arrests, firings, and ridicule, collapsed under the weight of reality. Winning had always been a delusion. Now the truth was undeniable. Charlie Sheen was mortal, vulnerable, and deeply broken. Rock bottom wasn't just about illness, it was about isolation. Hollywood had already distanced itself from him after his 2011 collapse. Now, with the revelation of his diagnosis, he became untouchable. Roles dried up. Invitations vanished. Even among former friends and colleagues, silence replaced solidarity. And yet, in a strange way, this was the most honest Charlie Sheen had ever been. For decades, his chaos had been entertainment. His meltdowns became memes, his addictions headline fodder. But in that interview, stripped of bravado, he was finally just a man, afraid, ashamed, and human. The tragedy was undeniable. Here was a man who once embodied Hollywood's golden boy, who had become the highest-paid actor on television, now reduced to a cautionary tale of excess, hubris, and denial. Charlie Sheen had reached rock bottom. And this time, there was no punchline, no viral clip to soften the blow. Just silence, grief, and the brutal clarity of truth. Charlie Sheen's story is not just the collapse of one man. It is a cultural mirror reflecting how Hollywood, the media, and the public create, consume, and ultimately destroy their stars. For much of his career, Sheen embodied a fantasy that audiences couldn't resist, the reckless bad boy who lived without consequences. He was Wild Thing on the baseball field in Major League, the ambitious young broker in Wall Street, and later, the carefree bachelor in 2.5 Men. Each role fed the myth of Charlie Sheen as a man immune to rules, immune to time, immune to failure. Hollywood rewarded this image. Studios built projects around him. Networks paid him millions. Advertisers lined up for his name. But fame is a double-edged sword. The same qualities that made Sheen fascinating, his defiance, his indulgence, his chaos, were the very traits that the industry and the public turned against him when he stumbled. What once was cool became dangerous. What once was edgy became pathetic. The transformation was swift, brutal, and very public. And the public didn't just watch his downfall, they participated in it. Social media turned his manic interviews into viral punchlines. Tiger blood and winning became catchphrases repeated endlessly, stripped of their context. People wore them on t-shirts, remixed them into songs, and laughed as Sheen's unraveling became entertainment. Few stopped to consider that behind the spectacle was a man battling addiction, mental health struggles, and a devastating illness. This dynamic reveals something uncomfortable. We glorify excess until it destroys the person living it. Then we mock the ruins. In Charlie Sheen, we saw both extremes, the thrill of rebellion and the horror of its consequences. His legacy, therefore, is not just cinematic, it is cultural. He became the embodiment of a cycle where fame builds gods and then delights in watching them fall. At the same time, Sheen's story also raises questions about responsibility. How much of his downfall was his own choices, his addictions, his reckless behavior, his arrogance, and how much was the result of an industry that enabled him, excused him, and profited from his chaos? How much blame belongs to the networks that kept him on the air long after the warning signs were clear? To the tabloids that fed on his destruction? to the audience that turned pain into memes? In the end, Charlie Sheen's legacy may be less about his acting and more about the lessons he leaves behind. He was a brilliant actor who gave unforgettable performances. He was also a cautionary tale of how quickly fame can curdle. He showed us the allure of rebellion, the intoxication of believing you are untouchable, and the inevitable truth that no one, no matter how famous, no matter how rich, is immune to consequence. And perhaps the darkest reflection of all, we, the audience, helped write his tragedy. The lights fade, and the image of Charlie Sheen lingers, not the grinning sitcom star of 2.5 Men, not the fresh-faced soldier in Platoon, but the man who sat in front of cameras and admitted to the world that his life and his body were no longer invincible. For decades, Charlie played characters who lived on the edge, and for just as long, he lived that way himself. Hollywood rewarded the chaos, the bravado, the myth of the bad boy who couldn't be broken. But time always tells the truth. Addiction caught him. Scandal swallowed him. Illness stripped him of the illusion of immortality. And yet, in his downfall, Charlie Sheen gave us something brutally honest. He exposed not only the cost of excess, but the hunger of an industry and an audience eager to consume it. We laughed at his winning. We turned his collapse into memes. We treated his pain as entertainment. His tragedy is as much ours as it is his. So the question remains, was Charlie Sheen a victim of his own self-destruction, or of a culture that delights in watching its idols burn? Because under the spotlight, glory and ruin look almost the same until the light goes out.
smoking 7-gram rocks. He was smoking 7-gram rocks.